Hi, everybody. As was just said, I'm Joe Hanley, and thank you for having me here today. I'm not an emergency planning professional. I'm a social worker, I'm an educator, a researcher, and I just kind of happened into this area through some of the work that I was doing, but now I've been involved in it in the last 5 years or so. And, good first slide. So I'm here today to talk about a training program that we developed for social workers working in disasters. It was part of the British Association of Social Workers Disaster Working Group. That group was set up in 2018 after the events of kind of Grenfell Tower, Manchester Arena bombing, and the London bridge attacks as well, and the experiences that social workers had had during those events. And it became really clear from those experiences that some work needed to be done in this area to improve the experience of social workers going into these events, improve the resources and support and training that they had. So that group's done a lot of work. Some people in this room have been involved in that work as well. And so we've really drawn on, social workers have been a really important part of that, social workers who had experienced disasters and their stories, the people that they'd supported, but also just learning from other professionals, government representatives, international experts, researchers were all drawn in. So we've had amazing people in and out of that group over the last 5 years or so. So this is kind of a culmination of a lot of that work, which is this disaster training that we've developed. I don't have the clicker, sorry. I was about to just really rudely be like, next slide, please. Yeah, brilliant. So yeah, as a researcher, my starting point is going to be research and kind of looking at the research that's out there. So you can see here that there's clear evidence of social work response to disasters going back over 100 years. And despite that, the research consistently still shows that social workers don't feel supported or properly trained when they go to respond to disasters. Too often it's an experience of, what am I supposed to do here? And part of that's kind of the narrowing role of social work in recent years, well, in recent decades, I should say. But also that's just about that, something that people have talked about, that lack of support, those lack of resources that are there. So again, the working group's done a lot of work, but one of the things that we've really been trying to do is to develop this training for social workers. Yeah, there were some examples of training to build on, but we were really focused on the England context, and there really wasn't much in the England context to build on. And we also try to push the legal imperative side of things. I think it's quite funny talking about the Civil Contingencies Act with this room, because you probably all know it a lot better than I do. But when I'm with a social work group, which is usually where I've kind of done presentation on this, I kind of have to give some more detail and explanation about what that is. But it's really about kind of, when you're talking to local authorities and talking to the government, letting them know, there's a legal imperative for local authorities to be prepared and to train adequate staff to respond to disasters. Social workers regularly respond to disasters, and they say that they don't have that training and support. So there's something going wrong there, potentially with legal implications. And I think that's something that we really try to drive home. Yes, it's in research that this is needed. Yes, it's in the experiences of social workers that this is needed. But really, legally, local authorities who employ social workers and send them to respond to disasters should really be thinking about, we need to be thinking about how better to train social workers, how better to support them, because it really, the stories of social workers that I've heard over the last 5 years, response to Grenfell Tower in particular, people left the profession because of the experience they had from that, feeling that they weren't supported, weren't trained, and they just thought, look, I can't even go back to my usual social work role. Part of that's because they were often doing that usual social work role alongside the response to disasters, which wasn't really fair to them in the first place. So there was a kind of an iterative approach to creating this training, and it started with thinking about what are the learning outcomes that we wanted social workers to have when they finished this training. So we developed a guide based on these learning outcomes. You can see them there, there's 12 of them. And this was designed to kind of be a guide and a framework to support anybody who wanted to train social workers in disasters. So if a local authority wanted to create their own training, this could be a starting point. If a university wanted to provide some training, that could be a starting point as well. And it was just about kind of bringing in those experiences, bringing in that research, and kind of having some sort of set framework for where we went with it next. And so developing the actual training that we did, we started by doing a systematic literature review. I say we, there was 325 sources accounted for in that systematic literature review. I didn't do that, thank God, because that's reading through. I mean, the fact that they got to 325 relevant pieces of research, and they must have looked at thousands to kind of narrow it down to that. So no, I will not take any credit for that systematic literature review. That was done by Lena Dominelli, led on that, who's a university lecturer in Stirling. But that gave us an amazing starting point. This was the biggest systematic literature review of research about social workers and disasters that had been done. The other reviews that were out there were rapid reviews, quick reviews, some of them quite recent in response to COVID, but none of them at all were as ambitious as this. And the British Association of Social Work funded this, which kind of allowed that to come about. The training itself was funded by the Open University, which is where I'm a lecturer, and it's very much based on that open university approach. So some of you might be familiar with that, but it's that asynchronous, working through the training in your own time and doing it in your, so it can fit around the rest of your life. So the training is based on 4 modules. Each one is 4 hours, so we're really talking about 2 days. So it's not a huge commitment, but as you'll see when I talk about the pilot that we did, it was trying to get social workers to even have the time to do those 2 days was really challenging. The training's free to access. It was designed from the start that anybody could access it. So we wanted this really to be open because we wanted to reduce as many barriers as possible to being able to access this. So from the start, we wanted this to be free, open. All anybody has to do is click on the link, and then you can start working through those modules. And there's a workbook provided as well that they can do kind of tasks as they go along with it. And again, that's so that people can kind of fit it around their own time. And it is very much, like I said, it's that asynchronous thing, so social workers or anybody really can work through it in their own time individually, but we also encourage a bit of collaboration. So some of the social workers who did the pilot did it together in the same workplace, and they talked about the benefits of that. And there's also a lot of the kind of tasks that people are asked to do as part of the training involve engaging with other people in the workplace, finding out about things in the workplace, talking about it in supervision, talking about this with managers. And that's actually been that was a really impressive aspect of the pilot findings, that we found that people did do that. Some of the social workers who did the training talked about it in their team meetings, and that got other people interested in it. Some of the social workers who did the pilot ended up volunteering to become emergency planning representatives in their teams, so that if there was an emergency, they could be called on to respond. There's just kind of a quick overview of what the training content looks like. I don't think we need to go into, but the link to the training is there, and the slides will be shared, I believe. But the British Association of Social Work did some funny meddling with their website recently, so I'm 90% sure that link would still work, but I can't be sure because they did, it was a bit of a nightmare. They redid their whole website, and that meant that a load of old links didn't work. But anybody who kind of wants to know more about the research at the end, just Google it as well, just social work and disasters training, and it's like the first thing that comes up anyway, because like I said, there isn't really much out there. This is just these are some snapshots of what the training actually looks like. So you can see it's kind of things you read through. It links you to videos and things in there as well. It's got text. You got workbook tasks that you do. And like I said, it's very much based on that OU asynchronous thing where you work through it yourself. So we did a pilot study. It was a small pilot study. So we had 6 social workers engaged with the training. We gave them 10 weeks to complete it. And like I said, it was only 2 days. There is a link to the pilot study there that, again, I hope actually still works. But again, if you just Google social work and disasters pilot study, it's the first thing that comes up. The research team, kind of in developing the training and also in doing the pilot, you can see them there. I want to make sure that I kind of call them out. And Lena Dominelli, who's been absolutely amazing, she's kind of one of the she is the most prolific kind of writer and researcher around social work and disasters for sure. So it was amazing to have her on board, and the support of the British Association of Social Workers as well. So the findings of the pilot that we did, again, small pilot, but we're looking towards bigger evaluation. But for the small pilot that we did, they were overwhelmingly positive. Social workers, some who had experience of, well, with COVID, all social workers really have some experience of working in disasters and emergencies. But some of the social workers had also had experience of working in Grenfell and Manchester arena bombing, and they were overwhelmingly positive about it. Like really, really. The content itself, the learning, the improvements of their confidence was a big thing, because the training wasn't always, and actually not that much, was about kind of teaching them necessarily new things. It was about giving them the confidence to be aware the skills and the knowledge that you have are relevant to these contexts. That's why social workers respond to disasters. That's why research suggests that social workers have a key role to play in disaster response. But it's about kind of building up confidence that, yes, I know this. I've got assessment skills. I've got communication skills. I've got interpersonal skills. I've got community development skills. These are the things that I need to bring to bear on a disaster. And that's, from the social workers that we spoke to, often the experience was getting to a disaster situation and being like, what do I do now? Where's the assessment criteria? What piece of social care legislation am I supposed to apply here? And obviously, you need to be far more innovative and inventive in those contexts, and think about what is the context of this disaster and what do I need to apply in that context. But yeah, probably the biggest theme was workplace challenges. So these were social workers. And keep in mind, all 6 of these social workers who did the pilot volunteered for this, knowing that it was going to be 2 days commitment, knowing that it was going to be that they were going to have 10 weeks to do this in. So none of them went into this thinking, I'm not going to have the time to do this. But when it came to actually doing the training, the biggest challenge that was faced was just getting the time, prioritizing this. People talked about doing it on their holidays, weekends, evenings. Somebody talked about doing it at 2 a.m. And still, you turn on their work computer and then they would have emails flying in, or emails that they hadn't looked at, or some other case notes or whatever it was. So getting the time to prioritize this was a major, major challenge, and not one that many of them actually effectively overcame, despite, like I said, doing it in their own time. And that's not just related to this training. That's really, unfortunately, typical of social work workplaces now. CPD is really, really under-prioritized. And it's a resourcing thing, as I'm sure every presentation that's been done yesterday and today will mention resourcing in some way. But it's 100%, it's a resourcing issue, and it's not one that is easy to overcome. But we did try some things. So we created a letter that social workers can bring specifically to their employer if they want to do this training, and say, this is the training I want to do, this is how it links with other things, and this is the commitment that I need from you to support me to do this. Not sure how that's going to go, but we also ran some kind of engagement activities for employers. But it's really, the training is supposed to be so flexible. And the fact that even with that flexibility, social workers really struggle to engage in doing it really is a damning indictment of kind of the context of CPD and social work. Not really necessarily that relevant to here, but that's the challenge that will be faced if trying to kind of implement this on a broader scale. So next stages, we actually do have a National Social Work and Disasters Conference on November 16th. It's the first one we've ran since before COVID, so that's really exciting to kind of going back to that we've organized that as well. Everybody here is welcome if anyone wanted to attend that. We're kind of... I think it's important. There's a book that we came out with a couple of months ago called Out of the Shadows, which really spotlights that social work role and some of the work that's been done around that, and some people like Lucy Easthope collaborated with us on that. So that's out there if anyone kind of wants to learn more about the role of social work in disasters. But it's about kind of what we do with this training now. So the research in social work and disasters, a lot of it talks about the experience would have been really helped if there was a pool of disaster-informed social workers that could be called on, because the experience is often, hey, team of 40 social workers, there's something going on down, my own experience was there was a gas leak explosion in where I worked maybe 15 years ago, and a couple of people died in that, but obviously the community around that were also really, impacted by that, even though, compared to some of the disasters I talked about earlier, it's a smaller scale. And then when the team were asked, can people go out and respond, people were like, do I have the time for that? Do I have the resources? What will I actually do when I get there? But imagine a world where there's a pool of social work informed disaster-informed social workers that could be called on in that context to respond, whether it's locally, but also nationally, maybe even internationally, that we knew that these people were there. And this is a short training session. That's not to say that this should be the be-all and end-all, but it's a starting point for getting that kind of confidence and knowledge there. But obviously that raises concerns about who maintains that pool of disaster-informed social workers, who ensures that there's currency and that they keep up to date with things. And that's not something, we're engaged with the Department for Education, Department of Health and Social Care, and other partners about how to make that work. And we've come up against a brick wall so far, but we're hopeful. And I think that that's really what is needed to prevent kind of the experiences that have been up to this point much more negative in relation to people just feeling that they're thrust into it without any support or training. But the positive of this is that the training's being rolled out. We've got charities rolling it out, local authorities, NHS trusts, even government departments, and some international partners, even though it is England-focused. So we've got dozens of employers covering hundreds of social workers who are committed to putting their social workers through this training, those workplace challenges notwithstanding. And there's a whole lot of references because deep down I am a researcher. Great. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Joe.
And just to say really quickly, like I said, if anybody does want the link to the training or anything like that, just come up and talk to me. I'll give you my email address, and I'd be very happy to share it with you. Thank you.
Some really exciting developments there, so thank you ever so much for that.